Welcome back. New sale just dropped and it is 30% on basically every GE vehicle in the game, which is a little bit less than expected, but it's a start of the year sale, which is not as good as the anniversary sale usually is. They do say that the sales will last till the 13th of May. So on the 6th of May we will get the packs on sale as well, which is nice to hear beforehand, because normally it's a bit of a guessing game. Now we aren't sure if they are going to be 30 or 50%. I'm gonna assume 30 as well. They do that sometimes, but last year they were 50. So I can't actually say for certain. But with some nations, it's better to go for the pack vehicle as it is to go for the GE vehicle, because the pack vehicle is just better bang for buck. Now I already made like a 1.5 hour long video on the sales in November, which is essentially still all the way up to date. There are some minute differences which I want to cover right here. I want to give you my recommendations of the actual premium planes. I don't want to get into detail with the talismans and stuff. This video is going to be half an hour long again, or even longer. I'm going to try to keep it brief, but again, normally when I say that, I end up making it 2 hours long. So let's get right into it. I do want to start off with saying that premium time is always worth it if you play a decent amount. Now, if you barely play the game, if you play like 5 games a week, then yeah, get a premium plane. You're probably better off buying something that you simply want to fly, so you don't really have to worry about grinding. But if you do want to grind and you don't play a lot, premium time is not the best bang for buck. But if you do play like 10, maybe 15 games a day, or even 5 a day, premium time is basically always worth it, because it will essentially just double your output overall. Now let's start with the US tech tree. Now I do want to start off with the XP50. Now I absolutely hate this thing. I think it's an absolute cancer of AirRB, but it's fantastic. You get an airspan, you have pretty damn good flight performance. It's pretty close to something like the Bf 109 F4 in the dogfight, but the high altitude performance is simply much better. The issue is the cannons. You only have 2 cannons with 60 rounds per gun. However, the AN/M2s hit extremely hard, and then for the 50 cals, you do have a decent amount of ammo for them, 500 rounds per gun, but the bells aren't that fantastic. I normally run universal and air targets. Then we have the XP55. Now this one is, I think, slightly worse, but nowadays it's actually tier 3. So it is worth picking up. It is severely overpriced, however, even with the sale going on. I think it's like 4,300 normally, but it's rank 3 now. It is 4.3, and this thing is mainly carried by the high-speed compression. Now it does roll quite badly at high speed, but the pull is extremely strong. It climbs okay, and the firepower is absolutely amazing with 200 rounds per gun of the AN/M3, as well as 200 rounds per gun on the 50 cal. So it's a bit of a trade-off on the XP50. I think the XP50 is more consistent, but the XP55 is a little bit of a frag machine, simply because the cannons are nicely packed together and they hit extremely hard. And then for a little bit of a higher tier prop, we have the LF Mark 9. Now you can't really go wrong with this thing. It's probably one of the best Spitfires in the game, BR for BR. Keep in mind, in up tiers this thing is going to struggle a little bit, because it's simply not fast enough, but at low altitude it climbs extremely well. It's decently fast, especially for a Spitfire. It goes like 580 kilometers an hour in a straight line on the deck. And of course the maneuverability is absolutely nuts, and you can dogfight about everything that you run into, as long as it's not something Japanese. Now even some Japanese planes like the Ki-84 you can dogfight, but A6Ms, A7Ms are still things that you want to stay away from, but you're faster and you climb better, so you should be completely fine. What bells we run on this one? I run stealth. Let me just change that real quick. I run stealth, sometimes universal, sometimes stealth. I'm kind of on the fence on what's the best for this cannon or for these machine guns. The 7.7s are not your main armament anyway. You really are just trying to hit them with your 20mm. And then for the last one in the GE vehicles anyway, we have the A2D. I do want to digress. Might want to be careful with this. Try 7.0 a little bit, see how the matchmaker is. I haven't flown it. I cannot fly all these planes just after the BRs have been dropped. I haven't flown 7.0. I did get down tiered a couple times from 8.0 to 7.0, but it wasn't all that frequent. Try out 7.0 before you pull the trigger. It is an amazing grinder. I made a video on this thing pretty recently. Very good climb. You have an airspan. You have pretty good guns. Now it's not fantastic as a fighter, but it's pretty competent, and as a grinder it's probably one of the best in the entire US tech tree. Now there are some honorable mentions, and I mainly want to say wait for the F5C or the F4S. I wouldn't go for the F20, it's simply too high of a BR. You are going to be sucked up into Gripen territory basically every game. So I want to say stay clear from this. Get the F4S if you want a more technological plane where you actually have to use the missiles, use the radar, and you don't have to worry about flying the plane too much because the airframe is absolutely cheeks. And if you want more of a gunfighter, get the F5C. Now it is harder to fly, but it's also super handholdy, and 10.3 is a super favorable matchmaker right now. So it's up to you. I would say wait for the sales, otherwise I have the 4 nominations directly down there. Then we go to Germany. We have a few planes here, and Germany is a little bit rough because they don't really have all too many things to pick from. Most of these planes are mid, some of them are okay, but I wouldn't spend money on them. So on this nation, I would say go for talismans. But if you really do want to buy a premium, you want to fly one of these. Now you have the Junker 288, it's super consistent, it's boring, it's brain dead, but it's a good grinder, and I hate recommending this thing every time. But it is worth the money if you just want absolutely brain off type of grinding. You will basically always reach a base before you get intercepted. The damage model is fantastic, and the gunner coverage as well as the top speed is pretty damn good. And then we have a little bit of an issue. These two, I'll get into it in a second. The Yak 1B is a fantastic grinder, but it's a pretty low BR and it has a very low multiplier. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but if you really want a low tier plane so that you can get quickly up until like rank 3 and then talisman something like the 109 F4, do it, or the D9. D9 or F4 are probably the best ones to get in rank 3, and then you can progress through there. But again, I wasn't going to go into talismans too much, but with this nation, it's kind of too bare bones not to do so. Then we have the Tempest Mark V. Now keep in mind, this thing is not the same as the one in the British tech tree because it doesn't have the extra octane fuel. So it is a little bit worse, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. But if you want a GE premium and you want a fighter, and you want it to be a decently high rank, this is basically the only thing I can recommend, but personally, I would wait for the D13 to go on sale, probably next week. They have the Dornier 335B2. Now this thing is an absolute frag machine. Don't expect it to be the best in terms of performance. It's extremely heavy. You can dogfight somewhat, but it is going to rely on your enemy making massive mistakes. It's mostly just a head-on mobile. You have 3 very good guns and then backed up by 2 pretty decent ones. So you can kind of just air spawn in, shoot at everything. And if you get left alone, you can also just ground pound and rack up a lot of points that way. So personally, I run the HVAP belt on the 30mm, so you can actually slam planes as well as light pillboxes, medium targets. You can basically click on everything and it dies. And then you have the 20mm. I run air targets because stealth isn't as fantastic anymore nowadays. Then we have the USSR, and the USSR is actually the other way around. It's actually pretty easy to recommend something. And I want to start off with the P-63 A5, 3.3, low BR, pretty good flight performance. Be careful of the low speed performance because it doesn't have a working engine below like 250 kilometers an hour. And it has very good multipliers. It's super fast. The armament is a little bit wacky. You have 450 cals, not the most amount of ammo, and the 37 is a bitch to aim, as well as just not doing damage half the time. It's a good plane, but expect to be somewhat frustrated while flying it. Then we have the VK107 Yak 3, probably one of the best fighters in the game still at rank 4. The Yak 3U is better, so if you don't need a premium, if you already have rank 4, I recommend you to just buy the Yak 3U. If you don't, you can always get the VK107. It will do you good service. The only issue is that it overheats quite badly. The bells here are going to be the tracers. Now the D9 is not on sale, but for future proofing, if it does go on sale, also worth the pickup, but it's better in the squad. If you're playing with someone or if you're noticing that the teams are doing exceptionally well, then you can't really go wrong with it, but this is not the best plane if you are mediocre at RRB, you are new at RRB and you are playing alone, because it is just more of a supportive fighter. It is very good, but the situation and the conditions need to meet the plane. And then we have the 2 planes that I'm kind of on the fence about. We have the Su-11, which is extremely under-tiered. It is 7.3. And we have the MiG-15 BIS-ish, which just went down to 8.0, which is essentially a MiG-15 BIS that's like 1% worse, and it has a better air-to-ground ordnance. I am on the fence on what to recommend here. The Su-11 is just completely bonkers still. But again, I'm not sure how the 7.0 to 8.0 matchmaker is acting up right now. So I am not completely confident in telling you get one or the other. Try the BRs out a little bit. Both of these are absolutely amazing. Especially for the BR now, the MiG-15 BIS and the SU-11 are both pay to win in my opinion. So you can't really go wrong with either. I would personally fly the MiG-15 BIS-ish because it's simply more fun to do so. And it will kind of train you with the MiG guns. Whereas the SU-11 is like a one-off plane. So if you are looking for something more unique, then definitely go with the SU-11. I can't really give you a clear verdict just yet. And for the belts, we run air on both of them. Great Britain is actually mostly props. So we have the Mustang Mark 1A, which is pretty good. It's not the best flight performance, but it has very good guns. And it's pretty fast. Doesn't climb the best, however. It's a very, how do I say it? An average good plane, but it's mostly a fragmobile because of the cannons. And it is being up-tiered, and that is just the case with planes that have good guns at low BRs. They end up getting up-tiered because it's very easy to get kills with them. So do be careful with that when you buy a thing like this. It is good for grinding. It gets kills very quickly. Just keep in mind that the climb rate and the, well, just low speed acceleration in a dogfight isn't that fantastic. You buy this thing to frag at low BRs and get an absolute metric load of Silver Lions while doing it. Now we have the actual planes. We have the Spitfire Mark 14, which is probably the best Griffin in the game, but I don't really recommend it. But if you really want to buy a Spitfire here, because the LF Mark 9 is not available at the moment, I believe if it is, get this one over the Mark 14. If it isn't, get the Mark 14 if you really want a premium Spitfire. But I don't recommend you to buy it. I would recommend to skip the premium props other than the Wyvern at rank 4 for Britain. Now we do also have the Hornet, and the Hornet is good. You have an airspan, it is fast, you have very good acceleration, it has some of the best climb in the game, but keep in mind this one has worse engines than the Mark III Hornet that you will find in the British tech tree. There you have it. It's a good bit worse. So if you already have the Hornet, I would say skip it. I would say don't really get this. I would skip most of the British props in terms of the premium sales, because the Wyvern, for example, is simply much better. And if you want to fly something a little bit higher over BR, I would say get the Attacker FB2 or get the Mark 8 Reaper. Personally, again, I would go with the Mark 8 Reaper. The matchmaker is pretty stable right now, I think, because 8.0. And I'm saying that after just saying that I'm not sure what the battle rating is doing, but that's only because the Reaper works, whether it's a down tier or an up tier, because you kind of fly it the same way. And now with the actual fuel slider, you can actually put it on 8 or 10 minutes and not having 6 or 20, making this thing bearably flyable. Barely. Har. So, again, be careful with the matchmaker. Attacker at 7.0 is good. It's not 7.3, so it's a little bit safer. But if a lot of people buy the MiG-15 BIS-ish, you might get up-tiered every game, and then you do not want to fly this thing. With the Mark 8 Reaper, you are going to be safer. But again, I mean, the premiums for Britain just kind of suck. I would personally get the Wyvern, and then Talisman something like the... yeah, I don't actually know what I would Talisman. Britain is a rough grind. I would say get the Hunter or the FJ4 UK, but it looks like it spells F for junk, and that is not without reason. I have difficulties actually giving you like a tip for what to get here, because I think really nothing is worth it until you reach like the Gripen, which you can get in Sweden as well. So personally, I think this is one of the roughest grinds in the entire game, and it's very hard to pick a good plane. So at the end of the day, I would say get like the Mark 8 Reaper or the Attacker. Reaper is probably going to be a little bit safer. And then Talisman, the GR1, which is actually pretty solid at 9.7. Do I say it? Did I say that correctly? No, I didn't. Scrap that. Do not... Sorry, I was thinking about the GR1A. You do want to Talisman the GR1A. It's actually pretty solid at 10.3. And here you probably want to get the Harrier at 9.7. But with the new battle rating changes, it is just all kind of rough. So probably get the Javelin. I'm getting a bit off track here. Let me summarize it for you. Javelin, pretty good. Scimitar, was good. I'm not sure how it is with today's matchmaker. Harrier is okay, has missiles, good climb, and you can orbital strike people with 2 AIM-9Gs. And then you can get the GL-1A, which is actually pretty solid at 10.3. Also made a video on that pretty recently if you do want to check it out. Then we reach Japan, which is stacked to the moon. Now we have some planes at low BRs, which are, for example, the Bf-109E7, we have the P-51C11, and the FAU-1A. Now, you can't really go wrong with either of these. I would personally get the E7 or the P-51. Why? Because they're simply more fun to play. The FAU-1A is very fast, but that's about it. I would personally get something that is fast and can actually dogfight somewhat like this thing, or have a plane that's a little bit slower, but can actually dogfight very well. For the belts, we run air targets as well as universal. And here we run tracers, I believe. Yes, we do. And then we have the two that nice shield, by the way. The J2M5 has been nerfed a little bit. The cannons aren't nearly as good as they once were, because the 30mm got nerfed in terms of their top speed. And instead of 920 meters a second, it now only goes 770 meters a second. Now, they do have a decent retention. They go fast for a decently long time. But I don't think that this plane is all that anymore, because it is simply a worse J2M2 or J2M3 with now not even that great set of guns. Still okay, and that's why I put it in here, mostly to just address the fact that it's not as good as it once was, but it's decent to good. And if you want to fly something with 30mm on the wings, be my guest. Then we have the A7M1, which is actually pretty okay. It's not as good as the Tech Tree version, but keep in mind that the Tech Tree version is a higher BR. But now they only differ 0.3, so I wouldn't personally get any of these. But I need to pick something in terms of the premiums, and all of these other planes are simply not it. I would personally get a Talisman on the Ki-84 Co, maybe the A7M2. Ki-83 is fun and it's pretty decent, but it's completely overtiered now. And 6.0 P-51Hs, Mark 24s are at 6.7, BIs are flying at that BR, A2Ds if you get fully up-tiered, or jets. I don't think is that fantastic at the moment. I would stick with the Ki-84. Now, all these planes I would skip. The Alta Y2 is simply too high of a BR. it's okay, I guess. I did pretty well in it, but it's not the best at 9.7. Keep in mind that something like the F-104A is a lower BR than you, which is not exactly fun. This thing, however, is a gift from heaven. Personally, I would Talisman this. I know it's not on sale. Well, I can actually show you how much it is. It is 3,000. It is expensive. But if you are grinding rank 6, 7 and 8 and you want to get to the F-15, this is by far the least painful option, because now you only have to play one of these, which probably you just want to Talisman the F-86 F-30. This thing is okay, but 9.0 is, I think, too high of a BR with the way compression is going right now. It's still a decent plane, do not get me wrong. Probably the best premium out of these. But I would Talisman the FCU, even though it's not a premium, even though it is not actually on sale. And then we go to China, which is actually pretty easy to do. Scrap the, well, you can Talisman those, but they are not in there for a reason. The F-84G is in here for a good reason. Airspawn, it's fast, decent guns, tracers yet again. Can't really go wrong with it, it's just fast. I run the rocket pods on the wings so that I can get the fuel tanks off. No particular reason, I think it looks better. And it makes your hitbox ever so slightly smaller. It doesn't actually impact your performance, so if you don't care about those things, be my guest and don't run the rockets. And then we have the Ki-84 Co for the same reason that I recommended the Japanese one. And I forgot to show you the belts. Run air targets and universal on the 20mm. Then we go to Italy, and Italy doesn't really have all that much. Now the G55 is an honorable mention. I think it's completely mid, but it's mid enough and it has good enough guns to just be a fragmobile, but I'm not entirely sure if this thing is actually on sale. Then we have the Bf-109 G2. It's not the best 109 anymore. It's definitely been power crapped a little bit with all the compression going around and the Wyverns being added. This thing is probably going to be kind of annoying to play in some of your games, but it's still a pretty decent pick. Now I run the gun ports because the flight performance isn't all that anymore regardless. And then you basically have nothing until the Ariete. Now the Ariete, as some people are complaining about in the comments, I don't care. To me, it's an Ariete. The Ariete is, well, you don't have to worry about the guns actually, because you only have default belts. Hits hard, it's maneuverable. The only thing that really counters you is super fast planes, like, well, the F-104A, that's the same BR as you. And all aspect missiles, or high-powered missiles from behind, if you aren't paying attention. You can dogfight literally everything in this thing, and you can just force head-ons and deny people their looks. But if you do get up tier to 10.3 and you run into Su-25s, A-10s, and you see those AIM-9Ls and R-60s, you better start playing like Amnesia, playing a horror game. Because if they spot you and they have the ability to lock you up, you die. Because you don't have countermeasures. But if you don't take that into the equation, this is probably the best pick to play. The G91R4 I think is not that fantastic unless you are playing it in ground RB. And over here there is really, it's a hard life. However, F104G is pretty solid, the Talisman. So is the G91Y at 9.0. I would play this over the Ariete. But you know, that is just my take on it. Again, I don't want to get too much into the actual talismans. Next up is Glitch's favorite nation and his favorite plane, the Yak 3. You can ask him how much this cost off the sale. The Yak 3 is an absolute no-brainer. It's fantastic. Air target for the 12.7, tracer for the 20mm, like the Russian 20s that you usually take. And other than that, I literally cannot recommend you anything here other than the F1C 200. Which will not go on sale until next week, but it might not, so don't pin me down on it. The Yak 3 is simply the only plane that I would spend money on in the French tech tree. Now over here, it's all kind of rough. It's all kind of shitty. I would personally get the FAU 7, perhaps the F8F1B, and then it actually becomes quite okay. We have the F84, we have the Uragan and the Berugan. And then you also have the MD452, which are all worthy of a talisman. And then we have the E10 Dart, which is kind of okay, but it's not really fantastic. I would personally go for the Alpha Jet. I made a video on that as well. It's not the best plane, but it's a bit of a fragmobile. And then for rank 3, or rank 7, we actually have quite a few planes. We have the F1C that you can talisman. You have the Super E10 Dart that you can talisman. Jaguar 1A, I would skip. It's okay, but I wouldn't play it. F8E FN, it doesn't have flares at 10.0. I don't have to say anything else, I think. And then we have the Mirage 3E, which is also kind of okay. And then once you reach this, everything is kind of okay, other than the DR1. Even with the gun port, it's simply not worth it for RRB. France is pretty easy to do every time around. And then we reach Sweden. And one of these planes is not on sale right now, I am aware. If you want to buy anything, I would say get the VL Pure Mursky or the BF-109 G6. Personally, I would go with the PM1 for short, because it says it on the tail. It's basically just a better 109 F4. However, it is slightly worse at super high speeds. It does compress quite a bit, and you do want to be careful of that, and as well as the fact that you have less ammo on the 20mm, but the 12.7s are actually a little bit better. I run air and stealth, and I absolutely adore this thing. It's fantastic. Now the J29D is not on sale, I am aware, but if it does go on sale, this thing is worth a pickup at 8.3. It's not the best plane, it's not a Sabre, it's not a 15 bis, but it's up there, it has good guns, and pretty solid flight performance. Not the best, but solid nonetheless. And then we have the BF-109 G6. Now I haven't actually flown this one out yet, I've flown the German one quite a bit. And you want to run IAI on the 13s, and I run air on the 20. Now I always run the 20, I never go for the 30mm, because the 30mm is kind of cheeks. Now it is kind of okay if you hit people, especially in props, but you have just so little ammo, I do not think it is worth the trade-off. Good speed, good climb, pretty good to decent maneuverability. It is not a Spitfire, however, and you do have to play around with your energy. And other than that, Sweden just doesn't have that much. Now the Saab 105 OE, I'm not gonna do it, my voice is fucked, I'm not gonna make the sound, is pretty good. Now with the air spawn and you can spray people down, it's okay, it's a good grinder, but I don't think it's a very good plane, and I don't think it's that much fun to play. The Vampire A28B, as well as the FB52, they are just better Vampires, but 8.0 I think is way too high. So I would personally, I kind of hate recommending this thing, but I would probably go for the OE. And then try the Talisman something down here. It's all kind of over-tiered. It's all kind of mid. The Rot Adam is... You know, they're all kind of not really that fantastic. I would personally just get the J25 XS and be done with it. But that's my take. Feel free to disagree. And then Israel is pretty easy because I wouldn't buy anything here other than the Spitfire LF Mark 9. And you can see that I talismaned all 3 of them, and that's because I hated flying these things, because I've already played them plenty in other nations. So I would personally go for the Uragan here, get the Spitfire, get the Uragan, and then go for the Ajit. And then from the Ajit you can go for the Kafir C7 into the Nets or the Boss. Barak 2 is not worth it. It's a worse F-16C. Kafir Canard is definitely the best premium here. But again, it's not on GE sale, so I can't recommend it as of right now. And that's it. If you want a more in-depth guide, I made like a 1.5 hour video tier list on all the premiums. Everything that I didn't say here, or everything that I said here, you have to overrule on what I said there. So the newest info is of course going to be the newest and therefore the most up-to-date. So if I conflict anything I say here with that video, is because something has actually changed. And that's all I have for you today. Feel free to use a decal, use mine in the description or someone else's if you don't have them yet. And you'll see me in the next one.